Hi, everybody. Today, in this session, I discuss a topic related to history of 18th century English literature, development of prose. Prose in 18th century is always very, very important because it is called essentially an age of prose and reason by Matthew Arnold. There are many reasons for the development of prose in 18th century. Let us discuss some of the important reasons for the development of prose in 18th century. One of such reasons is a rise of periodicals that helped the development of prose in 18th century. Because we have already discussed in the other sessions that 18th century is known for a variety of socio-political developments. The characteristics are already discussed in the other session. So all this party politics, clubs and coffee houses, and rise of satires, pamphleteering is all possible because there were periodicals. Periodicals play a major role in 18th century literature, particularly the Tatler, which was started by Steele in 1709 and started working up to 1711, was one of the important periodicals of the time. And the Spectator was launched by both Addison and Steele, and we come to know that this paper is very, very important, and Coverley papers or Spectator Club, what we call. So some interesting papers were published in the Spectator between 1711 and 1730. And another important magazine is the Gentleman's Magazine. It's a pamphlet produced monthly by Edward Cave from 1731 and worked up to 1868. So there is a Rambler started by John. Here Dr. Samuel Johnson contributed his essays to the Rambler. So Paine's objective was to deal with the disappointments inherent in life and with the setbacks of ambition. So Rambler also played a very important role in later half of 18th century. The periodicals also gave birth to periodical essay. Essay, we all know as a genre, it's a loose sally of mind, meditative prose, or a meditative prose piece on a particular subject matter. So essay in 18th century was published in periodicals, and the essays published in periodicals have a special character. That's why it came to be known as periodical essay. They were published in various journals, as I quoted, whether it is Rambler, Tatler, Spectator, Gentleman's Magazine. So notable periodical essays of this period are Joseph Addison, Richard Steele, Samuel Johnson, Oliver Goldsmith. They contributed greatly to the development of essay in 18th century. So these are some of the major writers of 18th century. I'm not going to deal in detail with all the writers. There were a number of writers in 18th century, but for the reasons, let's discuss Daniel Defoe, Jonathan Swift, Richard Steele, Joseph Addison, Oliver Goldsmith, Dr. Johnson. Daniel Defoe. Defoe is already known as a great novelist. We know him for his famous novel Moll Flanders, He was a great journalist also. In fact, he is one of the pioneers of journalism in 18th century. And he contributed his essays to the periodical called The Review. That way, Daniel Defoe played a very important role in 18th century prose. One of the greatest of prose writers of 18th century, Jonathan Swift. If Alexander Pope is the greatest satirist in poetry, he is the greatest satirist in prose. Jonathan Swift became very popular as a prose writer. He is the most original prose writer of his time. He contributed his papers to both the Tatler and the Spectator for some time. He was a great satirist. Of course, his satire goes very strong in Gulliver's Travels, where he almost reaches the stage of misanthrope. Misanthrope means started hating mankind. That's a level of satire we can see in his book, Gulliver's Travels. His important works, particularly the Drapier's Letters, the Battle of Books. Of course, it's a very interesting book of satire where Swift discusses the battle between the ancient writers and the modern writers. So this debate between the old and the new, tradition and modernity, it started way back in 18th century, the Battle of Books. So how ancients are very strong and the moderns cannot reach the status of the classical writers is the argument that we normally find. And the Battle of Books means the battle between two set of writers, the ancients and moderns. A Tale of a Tub is also an interesting prose work, but a very important one is Gulliver's Travels. It's an imaginary travelogue written by Jonathan Swift. It appears like a children's book, but it is a serious satire for the adult readers. So for children, it is wonderful world of Lilliput, Brobdingnag, Laputa, and Huinims. Gulliver travels in 4 important lands. In Lilliput, people are very small. In Brobdingnag, the people are like giants. In Laputa, there were scientists. In Huinims, it is a land of horses, where man is secondary, horses are primary. There, the satire grows very, very harsh. Yes, after discussing Richard Steele, let's discuss Jonathan Swift. Let's discuss Richard Steele. Richard Steele played a very important role. He was the founder of both Tatler and the Spectators, great friend of Addison, and both are discussed together. The contribution of Richard Steele to the magazines, the Tatler and the Rambler, the Spectator are very, very important. He wrote papers on the subjects like gallantry, entertainment, foreign, domestic news. And he also played a very important role in creating the character of Roger de Coverley, Will Wimble, very interesting things that we come across in Coverley papers, particularly written by both Addison and Steele. Joseph Addison should be studied in relation to Richard Steele. He was a great prose writer of 18th century. Along with Richard Steele, he started the Spectator and contributed major essays to the Spectator. Coverley papers or Spectator papers are the major contributions of Addison and Steele. As I already told you, they created a wonderful character of Sir Roger de Coverley in the Spectator papers. It's a very mild satire, but wonderful presentation of wit and humor. Interesting character essays are discussed. are presented in these magazines. Oliver Goldsmith is another important writer of 18th century. He was an Anglo-Irish essayist, poet, novelist, dramatist. We know him. He wrote a famous play like She Stoops to Conquer. He also wrote a wonderful novel like Good-Natured Man. But as a poet, he is known for Deserted Village. But as a prose writer, he is known for a wonderful work, The Citizen of the World, or Letters from a Chinese Philosopher. This is a series of essays, actually. He created in his essays the character of Man in Black, Beauties. That's why Goldsmith is always remembered in 18th century. He's a multifaceted, multidimensional, and in fact, a versatile writer of 18th century. This Dr. Samuel Johnson is a very, very important person. The second half of 18th century is also called Age of Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson was not only a famous critic, but also a great lexicographer. He was a poet, biographer, and a great genius. So his contribution to both language and literature is very, very important. He is regarded as one of the greatest figures of 18th century. His life and letters are very, very important. He contributed his essays to the Gentleman's Magazine. Of course, as a prose writer, he is remembered for his famous criticism, Preface to Shakespeare, Lives of Poets. He appeared to be a great biographer. Lives of Poets, Preface to Shakespeare is a good prose, good piece of criticism. He was a supporter of, he supported William Shakespeare, although he is a classicist. He supported the deviation of 3 unities in his famous Preface to Shakespeare. Dr. Johnson's works again, Preface to Shakespeare, Lives of the Poets, Dictionary of English Language, published in 1857, is a landmark in the development of dictionary. The first proper English dictionary was produced by Dr. Johnson. Miscellaneous Observations on the Tragedy of Macbeth is also a critical essay. That's about Dr. Johnson. Moving on, the last person we discuss in this session is James Boswell. James Boswell was a great friend of Dr. Johnson, and he was a great biographer of Dr. Johnson. So he set a new trend in writing of biography, and Life of Dr. Johnson, written by James Boswell, itself is a big example. And it's an honest biography and a model biography, in other words. So he is also considered as a great diarist of his times. So these are some of the important prose writers of, we focused only on literary writings. There were many political writings, writings on economy. I could not focus on these writers. Our focus in academics is on the very contribution of literary personalities of 18th century. Hence, with this, now I discussed the prose writings of 18th century. And I stop at this point and we meet again for the next session. Thank you so much.